In this video, we're going to discuss reflecting, one of our basic graphs. So reflecting is going to come from multiplying something in the equation by -1. So if f of x is our original function, then if we multiply that original function by -1, that's going to do a vertical reflection. So it's going to reflect up and down over the x-axis. Any point on the x-axis would just stay the same. If we go inside the function and replace x with -x, so basically multiply x by -1, then that's going to be a horizontal reflection. So if you've watched the video on shifting, we talked about the fact that any change inside with x changes the x direction, which is the horizontal direction. Anything not with x changes the y direction, which is the vertical direction. So that's why the first one is going to reflect up and down over the x-axis. The second one is going to be a horizontal left and right reflection over the y-axis. And again, any point on the axis that we're reflecting over will just stay the same. So let's illustrate this with our basic square root function. So we'll make a table of values here. For our basic square root function, we can't substitute in any negative values, so we'll start at 0, and then we'll just put in a couple of positive x values. I'm going to pick ones that will give us a nice output, so I'm not going to use 2 for x because that would give us a decimal. I'm going to go ahead to 4 here. So square root of 0 is 0, square root of 1 is 1, square root of 4 is 2. So that gives us some points that we can plot. So there's our basic square root function. Okay, now say we want to graph y equals negative square root of x. The negative's on the outside of the square root. So anything on the outside is a vertical change. That's going to affect the y's. Notice how inside the square root nothing changed, right? It's still just an x. With any type of transformation of any function, if nothing changes inside with x, then you can keep the x column exactly the same as it was for the original, and then you just have to worry about changing the y's appropriately. So the x column is just going to be exactly the same as it was before. Nothing changed horizontally. But we have this reflection. You can kind of probably visualize what's going to happen here. It's a vertical reflection, so it's going to reflect down and be below the x-axis, except the point on the x-axis will stay the same. So you can kind of use that to get the y values. In general, if you have a vertical reflection, basically what's happening is the y values are getting multiplied by -1. So if you take those y values in your original graph, I'm a little squeezed for space here, multiply these y values from your original by -1. So the first y value is 0. If we multiply that by -1, it's still going to be 0. That makes sense. That's the point that's on the axis, so it's not going to change. But if we multiply 1 by -1, we get -1, and that is what's going to put us down here. That's what gives us that reflection. And then similarly, if you multiply 2 by -1, you get -2. That puts us down here. So that gives us that reflection because the x-coordinate stayed the same, we just changed the sign of the y-coordinate. So here's our reflected graph there. Okay, now let's look at a reflection in the horizontal direction. So horizontal changes always occur inside the original part with x. X is our horizontal direction. So that means here we're going to have y equals square root of negative x. Now this time, nothing's happening on the outside. Right? There's no change outside the radical. So that means the y values are actually going to stay the same here. We didn't have any vertical changes. So since we had no vertical changes, the y column is going to stay exactly the same as it was in our original, which is the blue one. Now what happened is the x values are all going to change sign. So if we go back to our original x column here, and change the sign of all the x values, except 0, we can't, right? Then that's going to give us the horizontal reflection. So the point at the origin is going to stay the same again, but now we'll have negative 1, 1, so reflecting that original point, and then negative 4, 2.